All right. Hello, everyone. This is the agenda. I'm going to start with some background, and then I'm going to give you guys an overview of what we've been working with, and then we're going to do some live coding, and then there will hopefully be some time for questions. But let's start with who I am. My name is Henrik Sjööh. I am working in the web R&D team here at Configurator, living in Linköping, and we are a very small team currently, 3 people right now, but we're growing and we want more. I've been a professional web developer for soon almost 10 years, but I created my first web page about 20 years ago, so been doing it for quite some time. Anyway, so what is the, or well, rather, why are we doing this new catalog API? And it's because our customers invest a lot of time and money into putting great content into CT Designer. And wouldn't it be great if they could leverage this investment and reuse that content in other places? For instance, on the web. And that would, of course, allow our customers not only to, if they could use the same data for their web shop as the CT Designer, they wouldn't have to manage different databases, and they would avoid lots of manual work where today there is one person that's their only job is to make sure that all the different databases are up to date. But how does it work? Currently today, our customers store their product data inside catalogs, and this new web API that we are creating allows you to get this data out of catalogs and into, well, whatever you want. But once you have the data, maybe you want some help to visualize the data. Creating a 3D configurator is not something you want to do, so maybe you just want to use the one we provide you with. So that's the basic idea. And you can do anything with this. We are purposefully keeping this a very general solution. So you could embed our SDK in a web shop, or you could use it in an app, or you could create some kind of other design tool or anything you want. All right, so we're building our thing on catalogs. Maybe some of you, well, probably most of you know what catalogs is, but maybe some of you are not that familiar. So I'm just going to give a quick overview on what it is. It is a database-driven format, which is good because that allows us to expose the data on the web. It's compatible with the OFDA XML, which is a format that furniture manufacturers in the US use for their product data. And you create these databases via either importing in your OFDA XML or inputting the data directly into the catalog creator. So you don't have to be a programmer to do this. You can be a regular person that inputs the product data. And I also added CMSIM here, which is not exactly related to catalogs, but it is one of the newer file formats that Configurator has developed, and it is the only one we support in the web API. So if your catalog is still using the old format, CM3D, you can actually automatically convert your whole catalog to CMSIM, but it's important to know. Yeah, convert. So the API and the SDK, which is the new product that the web R&D team has been developing. The API part is a web API, but it's not just for web applications. Any modern application today makes web requests because you log in or whatever, fetch data from a server. So it's really for anything. You could have it in a mobile app, you could have it in a Windows app, you could have it, of course, on a website, or anything you can imagine. It's going to be globally available. We're working very hard to distribute our data all over the world, and so you can make requests to our API with low latency and even inside China. So we're going to sync all our stuff into China, so even our Chinese users can use this. I also want to highlight that we are very focused on making this a secure API, so all the requests will be over TLS, and every manufacturer who wants to use the API will get an API key that they can use to generate access tokens for the end users or the clients. So nobody is able to read the data without access. And so the SDK part, just having a web API is good, but maybe some people want some help on the way. So we're also creating an SDK. And the SDK is developed in a modular way. So if you just want some help to make web requests, you can just get that module. But if you want to have a 3D configurator, you can import the 3D viewer into your project. And if you want to have a option picker, you can use the option picker that we provide. And if you want a complete solution, you can just drop it in, and then boom, there's a 3D configurator with everything on your website. This SDK is developed with modern web languages. So for instance, we use TypeScript that compiles to JavaScript that then runs in the browser or on a server if you use Node.js. And we use Rust that we compile to WebAssembly for the absolute lowest levels of the SDK to get some performance benefits. And the UI components that we provide that you don't have to use, but you can, uses a library called React. And we only support the so-called evergreen browsers, which is the big ones. It's like Edge and Chrome, Firefox, Safari, all those ones. No Internet Explorer, because that's going away. And if you have any questions about this later, you can always just come talk to me or send me an email or anything. So all that talk is probably pretty confusing, even if you are a web developer, and I think most of you are not. So this is a small overview of how it's going to work. You embed our SDK in your client. It could be a web app, could be a mobile app, could be Windows application, anything. And then before you can make a request to our web API and get actual data, you have to get an access token. And you as a partner will have to have a server where you keep your secret API key. So your client has to make a request to your server, and then the server can generate an access key for the client. And once the client gets that access token, once the client gets access token, it can start to request data from the web API. And then our web API will go back to catalogs and fetch the data and then send it back to you. And another thing that is important is the documentation. Documentation is always hard. You never know what's a good amount. Too much is bad, too little is bad. You have to keep it up to date. But we are actually doing something that we think is pretty cool, and that is that we are automatically generating our documentation from our API specification. It's using a technology called Swagger, where you have this configuration file where you specify these are our endpoints, they have these return types, they take these arguments, and from that we can generate a documentation website that you as a partner can go in and view and see. But we also generate a server and a client. So our servers are guaranteed. There's no guarantees anywhere in any, like in IT. Sorry. Anyway, we generate the server and the client, so we make sure that they always match and that you get back what you expect. And if we make a change to the API, we generate a new server and client, and so there is no risk of us forgetting to update the server or having a typo, so they're always matched. And as part of the documentation, we also have an example app and an example server that we have implemented, so you can just clone our SDK and then run a command, and then you have a running server and a running client that does everything you need to talk to the API. So I want to talk a little bit about the business model, because it's good to know, but maybe you guys don't think it's so interesting. But it's good, it's important to know. So our business model is that we have two parts. We have a fixed price part and we have a dynamic part, and you have to pay for both. But we have the fixed subscription, which you pay annually to get access to the API, and it gives you access to the, access to the API. You get the SDK and you can have as many apps as you want. And then the dynamic part is per request. So every time you make a request to our API, that costs a little bit of money. But that's just to protect us, or not to protect us, but the more you use the API, the more it costs. But if you don't use it as much, it doesn't cost you very much. And then we have additional services, which has the same structure. You have a subscription fee and you have a dynamic fee, depending on how much you use it. So additional services can be things like high quality server renderings or exporting to different types of file formats. In the future, we will also have things like analytics, where you can see the usage of the API and so on. So, time for some code. I'm going to show you the example app and the docs. And so currently we have everything on our GitLab, the Configurator GitLab. So once you sign up, you will get access to this. And if you go to the repo and look at the README, there are instructions how to get going. This involves a lot of installing and downloading dependencies and so on. So I have cheated and done that before. But let's start up the SDK and look at the documentation and the example app. So this was a bit small, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. But you can see I just copy pasted the command from the GitLab, and it's going to start compiling all the stuff. And it's going to open up two tabs. One tab for the example app and one tab for the documentation. And so here you can see this is the automatically generated documentation site. And here are all our endpoints, and you can go in and look at them specifically and see what type of parameters they take. And there is also a long list of all the the types of all the data that we send back and forth. So if you are interested, you can look at that. And here is also the example app. And now I see that I forgot to switch out the API key. So this is all our test stuff. But by the way, you can go in here and click around and do some configuration. For instance.
These are all options that are specified in the catalog?
Yes. Yeah. This data is coming straight from catalogs. Yeah. And these models are also CM/SIM files that we download directly from the cloud.
Say, for example, if I had a catalog that was all CM3Ds, if I just ran a quick conversion of all of those, the options will still work?
Yes. Okay. Exactly. Good question. And so we download the CM/SIM files straight into the browser and parse them there and then show them. So this is all on the client, nothing is on the server. We just download the list of options and then a list of models, and then we show it. so that's how easy it is to get started. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what it's like to customize the UI a bit. So we can close this down. And so here we have, hopefully. All right, so here we go. So, yes. So once you're in the SDK, you have the example app, and you can take it as a base if you want to have an app that is very similar, or you can do something completely on your own. But I'm just gonna make some changes to the example app so you see how easy it is. So for instance, this configurator here, maybe I want to have it on the other side. Then I can just go in and put it on the other side. And then the page will reload automatically. But if I want to do something even more custom, I have, like a good TV chef, prepared something in advance. So we can swap out the configurator component for a custom configurator. It's a little bit slow loading today, sorry. But maybe I just don't want to have the export and render buttons, because I don't want my users to do that. I just want them to click the buy button. And so that is how you can change the actual structure. But if you want to have this on your website, of course you want it to look at home with your corporate branding and all that good stuff that your designers probably think of. So say we want to have a little bit of different font, maybe some different colors. That is pretty easy. And having a small picker here is not maybe that nice. You can see here, maybe there is. Okay, so you can't really see it because the projector isn't that good, but there's this is supposed to be gray and this is supposed to be white. So you're supposed to tell. There's supposed to be more difference. And I think 3D is a little bit small, so we can make that bigger by changing the size of the wrapper around the 3D. I should have picked a model that was a little bit smaller. And then you can add some brand styles that are just for your company to make it a little bit more familiar. And you see everything just continues working even though we changed the styling. And we can even change the styling of the radio buttons here. So even inside the components, we can change it. Really should have picked a model that was a little bit slower. This is our demo model, and it's very fancy, but it's totally too many polygons. We just wanted to show that we can have 100,000 polygons, and it doesn't matter. Well, apparently it does matter because it's a little bit slow. And if you want, you could add a buy button, but maybe that's not showing up. All right. So, yeah. Anyway, that's how easy it is to make changes to your own version of the web configurator with our SDK. And it's available now, actually, since this week. If you are an extension owner on My Configura, you can sign up for this. and start developing your own web configurator.
Approximately how much would it cost annually if I was an extension owner?
We haven't really decided about the price, but if you are interested, come talk to us afterwards. We can tell you. Any questions? Everything's crystal clear. All right. Then thank you. Oh, wait, we had a question.
How does the catalog server work? Is it like is it one instance or and where does it run? Does it run like on some cloud somewhere or how?
Yes. That is a good question. It depends on. I can give a very detailed answer. But what we use is we use everything runs on Amazon. We use a service called Global Accelerator. So you as a user send a web request, and that goes to the closest Amazon server. The closest Amazon server will determine which of our servers is closest to you, and it will send that request to the closest server. So we have servers in Europe, in America, and in Singapore. So no matter where you are in the world, and even in the future in China, but we're not there quite yet, you will get your request will be sent to the closest server. And in these regions, we have a small cluster of servers. So if one server goes down, there are others to pick up the slack. And if we get many requests, we can automatically start new ones. And if there is no request, we can turn off a few to save a little bit of money.
So you said that the partner should be hosting the service that will provide access tokens, right?
Yep.
What kind of information gets sent to that server, or is there's whatever data?
Well, since the partner manages this all by themselves, they can send as little or as much. The SDK does not include the request to your server.
Right. So there's a lot of the server that provides the access token. There's a lot of freedom in how you actually do that.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. I can show you the example server. It's just this. So it's literally just you have one endpoint that is authentication, and then that endpoint uses a it uses our SDK to make a request to our server and send it back to the user. So you don't have to do more than this. This is only required because you want to keep your API key secret. But if you want to have a configurator on your website that is publicly available, all you have to do is proxy the request through your server to our servers to get an access token.
But if you wanted to hide your catalog behind the user logging into like the app or something, that's still is something you could do.
Yep.
But you would have to implement it yourself.
Yes, you would have to add an authentication to this server. So only logged in users on your website can get access tokens.
Can you get like if the customer's bought like a configured lot of shares or something, could you get that info into CT Designer?
Yes, we are working on that. We have created a drag and drop interface, so you can have a little button that is a drag and drop target. So you just drag the thing, drop it on CT Designer, and then the share or whatever should just pop up. It's not quite done, but we have the drag and drop part done, but not the instantiate a catalog object inside CT. But the configuration makes it over.
That's really neat. Exciting.
Thank you. All right. No more questions. Thank you for listening.